welcome to another episode of It's Your Right. This is attorney Barbara Hudson, and you're watching Urban Houston Network, 43.5 on your Houston digital dial. And we have a wonderful young lady in our audience today. We have an attorney here in Houston, just recently moved to the Houston area, attorney Victoria Broussard. Welcome.
Thank you.
And how are you today, Ms. Broussard?
I feel excellent. How are you?
I'm just wonderful now that I have you on the show. And I'd like for you to tell our listening audience, where are you from?
I'm originally from Port Arthur, Texas. So after that, my mom joined the military when I was very small, so we started moving all around shortly after I was born.
And so you're an attorney?
I am. I'm a practicing attorney. I specialize in family law and criminal law.
Oh, you do both. That's wonderful. That's excellent. So, Ms. Broussard, I'm going to call you Victoria. Is that okay with you?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell us a little bit about your background and where did you go to law school?
I did my law degree at Thurgood Marshall School of Law here in Houston from 2001 to 2004. I graduated from the University of Texas in Austin with a degree in sociology. I started practicing in Austin in 2006 and practiced there for the last 9 years and recently moved back to Houston, which I'm very excited to be back.
Well, that is absolutely wonderful. And welcome to Houston. This is really a wonderful town. This city gives you so much joy. And I'm not from Houston myself, but I might as well be. I've been here for over 30 years now. So Houston can really make you proud of yourself. Really can. And as an attorney, you will find that there's such a diverse of people here in Houston. You have people from everywhere. Have you found that?
I have. It was one of the things that I noticed when I was here in law school, and I couldn't wait to get back. It took me 10 years, but I finally made it back.
So what brought you back to Houston?
Well, actually, I wrote a book, and the title of the book is I, Comfortable Victim. It's the story of my life, but it's told through a fictional tale whereby I use my life experiences to help other women who may have gone through some of the things that I went through.
Okay, let me ask you this. I, Comfortable Victim. That's an amazing name. How did you come up with that?
Well, I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse that went undisclosed and unresolved the better part of my life. As a result of not dealing with that and thinking that I was okay, I went into subsequent abusive relationships throughout my adulthood that made me come to the realization that I had become a comfortable victim throughout my life by not recognizing exactly how damaged I was.
So are you telling the audience that you were a victim?
I was of childhood sexual abuse. When I was 5 years old, I experienced some sexual abuse as a child, and I ended up being abused for another 10 years after that. I never told my mother until I wrote my book.
So you waited many years to expose the damage that had happened to you as a young child.
I did.
And what was that? Why do people do that?
Well, Barbara, it's the nature of that crime. Childhood sexual abuse is normally done to you by someone in your family or someone close to you, someone that you trust. And all of the beautiful characteristics that we see in children, their desire to love, their desire to forgive, to be caring, and to be giving, all of those characteristics are turned around and used against the child in this heinous crime called sexual abuse of a child. The nature of that crime causes you to secret that abuse because you know that if you tell, you're going to hurt a lot of people.
Right. So let me ask you, when did you decide that I'm going to let someone know, I'm going to tell someone, and who did you tell?
Well, I did tell my mother. You know, once I decided that I was supposed to write this book, when the title I, Comfortable Victim dropped in my spirit, that's the way I like to look at it. It was just like I came to an epiphany, a realization that that was who I had become, a comfortable victim, and that I had to write a book about it so I could help other women. And I chose to start telling all of the stories to my mom.
And that had to be really devastating to sit down, tell your mom that you had been sexually abused as a child. How did she respond to that?
It was very difficult for her and for me. So she didn't really take it that well because we were very close. We're only 15 years apart. So I knew that it was going to be devastating for her, which was one of the other reasons that I chose to secret the abuse, because there were people close in our lives that it had happened with. And so I knew how that was going to make her feel. And so we went through several different phases of trying to repair the relationship, trying to understand why, trying to make some sense of it all. And so we're still in that repair stage.
Okay.
But it was something that I knew I had to do, not only for me, but for other survivors.
Well, let me ask you, as far as you said this occurred when you were very, very young, did you ever report it to the authorities at this point? Is there a statute of limitations?
There is a statute of limitations, and none of the people who abused me ever came to justice. There was never any criminal case or any criminal charges brought. All of the statutes did run out, so.
So would you tell people in our audience that have been sexually abused, should they tell immediately so that they can seek some type of refuge or get some type of justice?
Absolutely, without a doubt. I have an organization called Beyond the Unveiling, which is a nonprofit that I started after I wrote the book, because I felt as though there was so much more to do. And so one of the aspects of the nonprofit is to teach children to tell immediately, to help parents and people who are guardians to see what the signs are, like bedwetting is a sign. And crying consistently is a sign, a lot of moodiness, different behaviors that the child is doing now that they weren't doing before the abuse started.
So as a young child or someone sitting here listening to you today, who would you suggest they go to?
Well, the person that they really need to go to is a parent. But unfortunately, it's difficult because sometimes parents don't understand and they believe that the child is making up stories.
Okay.
When I first had this experience at 5 years old, I did tell my grandmother, and she handled it so poorly that I never told again because I didn't feel like I was safe in telling her. So it added insult to injury, whereby she even knew who it was and nothing ever happened to that person, and she continued to let me go down there and play with them. So it was like telling doesn't do anything. So the issue becomes that there has to be a safe place, a safe person where the child knows this person is going to believe me, and they have to keep looking for that person until something is done. They have to keep telling until something changes.
Until someone believes them. So they really need to go to someone they can really trust, someone that believes in them. Would you suggest they go to a counselor or a teacher or someone?
Absolutely. If they have a teacher in their lives after they've maybe told a parent or an aunt or an uncle or anybody, if they still don't feel like they're getting that result that they need, or something is changing, something is being done, someone's going to the police department, then they need to tell a teacher or anybody that they feel like they can get a hold of that can help them.
So let me ask you, Victoria, now that it's been out and you've talked about it, what can other people do that have been victims? Say if they're listening or watching right now, and they want some closure in their life and they want to heal, so to say, what do you suggest they do?
Well, I also started a program through I Comfortable Victim. It's called An Open Heart Journey to Your True Self. What happens when you've been abused as a child, even if it's just neglect or physical abuse, it doesn't necessarily have to be sexual abuse. It could be anything. When that development in childhood has been disrupted, you have characteristics that start to grow within you that really aren't a part of who you really are.
Okay.
They're behaviors that exist as a result of what happened to you. So in the Open Heart Journey to Your True Self, in my program, I pretty much take people through the steps that I went through to get to this point where I've learned to live well with my truth because I know that truth has no judgment.
Okay. So besides your mother, after you told your mother, did you seek out anyone else? Did you go to counseling, church, or what else really helped you in your journey?
I did. I did counsel with a pastor in my life at that time. He was very instrumental even during the time when I was writing my book. My pastor and his wife were praying for me. They were counseling with me, making certain that I was okay because I went, all of the childhood experiences that you'll read in I, Comfortable Victim occurred to me. Now, of course, the book is fiction, and I've housed it in a fictional tale, which actually is one of the things that I think helps people when they're reading it, is because they can identify with the character I created versus so much identifying with me.
And it is a character. I mean, I started reading your book, and I was sitting there on the plane, and I'm like, you talk about hiding the fact that you were hit while you were in law school. You talked about going to the hospital, not wanting the doctor to know, just really just being very ashamed of what had happened to you, the fight. I just sat there and I'm like, how can this young lady take all of this abuse while in law school and still come out to be such a young, beautiful lady and practicing attorney?
Thank you.
So if people really are abused, they can still survive. Is that your message?
Oh gosh, absolutely. You can not only survive, but you can thrive. You really can have everything that you see in your mind's eye for yourself, but you have to clear that heart space. There's a space in our heart that where we need to go to that place and heal ourselves, because our healing comes from within. You know, a lot of times in our society, we're looking for other things to heal us. We're looking for a relationship. We're looking for a job. We're looking for some peace outside of us. But the peace that you seek has to come from inside of you first.
Okay. You've been just one excellent, charming young lady to talk to today. And you've given our audience so much information. So let's continue to talk about sexual abuse. And one thing I just want to point out is I saw our mayor just recently on television talking about sexual abuse, and she has proclaimed April as Sexual Abuse Month. So there should be more of an awareness out there. Is that correct, Victoria?
There really is. There's a growing section of women who are rising up and who are outing their abuse. There's a large community on Facebook. There's a lot of women like me who are doing exactly what I'm doing in their area, their communities, their states, and taking this message worldwide.
Well, that is absolutely wonderful. Is that something, what is your mission? What are you trying to accomplish right now?
Well, as I was stating earlier, my nonprofit, Beyond the Unveiling, is dedicated to the pursuit of eradicating childhood sexual abuse through a very comprehensive kind of out-of-the-box approach, much like the approach I took in I, Comfortable Victim with the therapy that I took the character through to get to that final end of healing and restoration. But one of the things that I think is important when you talk about pedophilia is the pedophile, and that's one of the things that is greatly left out of this equation when we talk about childhood sexual abuse.
And why is that? Just tell us why.
Well, because of the stigma. It is so difficult to understand when people hurt children. And with this particular disease or behavior, whatever you wish to call it, spirit, evil, whatever.
So do you really think it's a disease that's within a person when they tend to abuse a child?
You know, there's a lot of controversy about that, but what I want to do is remain open to what all the possibilities are. I don't want to close the door and say it's not this or it's not that. There is a combination of things that is going on in a person's mind when they hurt a child.
Well, let me just say this. One of the things I've always heard is that when a person has been abused themselves, they tend to become an abuser. Have you heard that?
I have heard that, very much so.
So that perhaps the person that abused you was abused, and abusers tend to continue. It's a lifestyle.
Yes.
and at some point it has to be cut.
Yes.
It's like a evil root that you just have to cut it off at some point.
You do, and pedophiles need treatment, and that's one of the things that I endeavor to do through Beyond the Unveiling, is to figure out a way to reach these people. You have different categories of pedophiles. You have the pedophile who's just thinking about children and is yet to commit a crime, and those are the people who maybe we can touch. If they had a place where they can go to, like a hotline, a number they could call. My nonprofit is still in its infancy stages, so we're setting up this programming now where a pedophile can say, where can I go where I feel at least somewhat safe in saying I have these issues? And that will deter them from ever hurting a child, hopefully. So we catch it on the other end instead of dealing with the survivor on the other end.
Well, you know, let's talk about that, because first that person has to acknowledge they have a problem.
Exactly.
They need to know within themselves that, look, I have these urges and feelings that I somehow can't control. Is that correct?
Correct.
And with the internet right now, I mean, you're finding that that's been an explosion with people just watching child pornography on the internet.
Yes.
And I think maybe that's somehow they're controlling themselves, because they're just watching and they're not actually out there picking up a child.
Well, while I can understand your point, I still think that watching that is also going to open the door for other things in their mind.
Okay.
So eventually they may
Get
to a point where they're ready to act on it. But if they know that there's some type of programming out there that can maybe help them and is willing to help them, that's the thing, is like you were saying, they've been so ostracized from our communities and from even getting help. Nobody wants to talk about how do you help a pedophile before they commit a crime.
Yes, because, you know, right now, in the court systems, they have to register as a sex offender. You have to know where they live. And that's sort of really embarrassing for someone trying to get their life back together when your address is being advertised. People in your community, they want to know. They can go to the source like the internet and find out how many sexual predators are in their neighborhoods. So how do they get help when they're always, like you said, they're being shunned by society?
Well, it's kind of like, you know, how we were with AIDS, 20, 15 years ago. Our communities have to start this open, continual, and non-judgmental dialogue about what's happening. First off, they're harming children. And if we can get to the root of why, then we can save the children and save the pedophile.
Victoria, this is really a great topic, and I think that our audience are really just looking at you and said, how could this beautiful woman be sexually assaulted and sit here today and talk about it? I mean, you had to be really, really brave, and I just commend you. So tell people what they need to do if they've been hurt.
You know, the first thing really, Barbara, is being honest, is opening up that heart space to your own self and letting yourself into that space. We always talk about letting other people in and opening up to other people so they can be in our lives. Well, what about your own relationship with yourself? What about you in your own heart space and what you feel about your life? Your life is your truth. And that's what I had to realize when I understood finally that I had become a comfortable victim and I had to stop it. I had to change it. I had to realize that this is the truth of my life and I couldn't hide from it any longer. And hiding from it was only hurting me even more.
So it starts from within. The person really has to know that they need to tell. They need to be comfortable with themselves and say, I'm not ashamed anymore. I want to talk about what happened to me. I want to be an advocate. I want to share my story. And I think that's what you did.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. That's all there is to it, is finding that avenue, that place where you say, I can live well with this truth and know that I'm not going to judge myself anymore for any of the things that happen to me. I'm not judging myself anymore.
Now, you talked about in your book, I listened and I was just reading, you talked about the brutality of of a man hitting you. How could you allow that? I mean, what was it that you just said? And I commend you because you said one day, I've just had enough. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to continue to live my life like that. It was like a light that went off. Is that what happened?
Yes, that did happen. I really think that it's the idea of shame and guilt and that this is what I deserve, because I think all those years, the sexual abuse that I went through happened over a period of 10 years with many, many abusers cross continents, because like I said, my mom was military, so we traveled to Europe and then came back to the United States, and so I almost just kind of felt like I had this stamp on my head. You know, like every time it would happen again, I would just be like, really, you gotta be kidding, you know, it just can't be happening again. But by that time, I had become that comfortable victim. I had gotten so accustomed to this happening to me that it was my normal.
So you thought it was normal or it was okay for a man to hit you or to abuse you in your mind?
Yeah, yeah. I kind of felt like that was my lot in life, if you will. You know, it's kind of strange.
Well, how is that you had the energy and the wherewithal to say, I want to become an attorney? I mean, that you really went on to get past everything that happened to you in your life?
Well, I had always wanted to be an attorney, and I think in some way that was my way of equalizing things. That was my way of saying, in this area I can stop abuse. You know, my little world right here where I'm a lawyer, I have control right here. When you're a victim of childhood sexual abuse, you really feel like you have no control over anything that happens. And I kind of felt like that even throughout adulthood with the subsequent domestic violence and relationships and things. And so when I realized that this one area I could have extreme control over, there was a good feeling for me with regard to that.
And so now you're practicing law right here in Houston, is that correct?
Yes.
So if people want to contact you about your book, if they want to contact you about your programs, or even if they just want to talk to you, how can they contact you?
Yes, I have www.broussard, BROUSSARD, legal.com is my law office website. And then the www.icomfortablevictim.com is where you can find me for I Comfortable Victim and order my book and reach me that way.
I Comfortable Victim. So you are a comfortable victim now, but you're living a very good life now, is that correct?
You know, I Comfortable Victim is what I was, Barbara.
Okay.
I'm no longer a comfortable victim. I have grown out of that. Now I am a victor. I am victorious in all that I've gone through.
Hi, that's very ironic, and your name is Victoria, and you are a victorious woman. I just commend you, and I just thank you for coming on the program today. And ladies and gentlemen of Houston, you've heard attorney Victoria Broussard. You've heard her story, and if you'd like to get in contact with her, give her a call. And you have been watching It's Your Right, Urban Houston Network, 42.5 on your digital dial. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.